What if I told you that an author predicted that he would die by drowning? What if I told you that the book that he wrote described the sinking of the Titanic years before it sank? That's weird, but not too weird. What if I told you that another author predicted almost every major event about the sinking of the Titanic? That would definitely be too real. It's my job to find the strangest mysteries and the most true yet unbelievable coincidences. When I first started skimming these books and reading the details, I almost thought it was a mistake, that someone had lied about when these books were written. But stick around until I finish this, because I'm saving the most unbelievable coincidence that I have ever heard, and I've heard a lot, for the very end. It's safe to say after this video your mind will be fully blown and you'll agree that what I have found is too real. The first book isn't as spot on as the second at predicting the sinking of the Titanic. It's titled, quote, How the Mail Steamer Went Down in Mid-Atlantic by a Survivor, end quote. It was written in 1886 by a spiritualist and investigative journalist named W.T. Stead. It tells the story of an unnamed ship, an ocean liner just like the Titanic, sinking in the Atlantic. Note, though, that this book was written 25 years before the Titanic. The hero of the story is on the ship and notices that there aren't enough lifeboats on deck to carry all the passengers of the ship. This is where the strangeness starts. As the story goes on, the ship passes through heavy fog and strikes a smaller ship. As water flows into the ship, women and children are given priority seating on the lifeboats. Fighting and arguing breaks out, and in the end, out of 700 people, the ship only has 200 surviving the horrible disaster. The name of the hero of the story is Thompson. He only survives due to a lifeboat circling back and seeing him struggling to stay afloat. The story concludes with a piece of advice from the author W.T. Stead. Quote, This is exactly what might take place and what will take place if liners are sent to sea short of boats. Now, I'm gonna inject some logic into this tale. The fears of sinking ocean liners at this time were pretty normal due to it being a very popular method of travel. Many books were written that contained mention of these massive and awe-inspiring ships. This part of the story up to now isn't what makes this story part of the video. In a horrible twist of fate, this author had told his friends that he predicted he would die by drowning, and he did, after sinking on the Titanic. That's right, the author W.T. Stead drowned during the April 15, 1912 sinking of the RMS Titanic. After reading this story, I found a line that sent chills up my spine. This line from the story that W.T. Stead wrote in 1886 most likely describes his true final moments as the Titanic sunk around him. Then I was left with a great multitude, whose agonized clamor stunned me. I felt a mighty, convulsive moment. Then the sea seemed to flash down on me in one mass, as if the wall of water fell from a high crag. Then I heard a humming noise in my ears, and with a gasp, I was up amid a blackened, wriggling sheet of drowning creatures. From How the Mail Steamer Went Down in the Mid-Atlantic by a Survivor, written in 1866 by W.T. Stead, just 25 years before he died on the Titanic. If you thought that the first story was too real, stay with me, The next one will put the first one to shame. An 1898 novella written by Morgan Robertson features a fictional ocean liner. Written 14 years before the Titanic sunk and years before it was even conceptualized, it tells the story of an ocean liner that sinks in the North Atlantic after striking an iceberg. The sinking of this ship and the Titanic have many similarities. Both were described as the largest craft afloat and the greatest of the works of men. These two specific quotes described both. Also, these key points have been said to predict the future. The ship in the book was 800 feet long, displacing 45,000 tons of water. The Titanic was 882 feet long, displacing 46,000 tons of water, only a difference of 1,000 tons, and only a difference of 82 feet in length. Both of these ships were described with the word unsinkable in the book and all through newspapers and spoken words. Both had what was described in the book and on the Titanic as a triple screw propeller. Both featured a shortage of lifeboats as the crux of the disaster. The book and the story carries as few as the law allowed, 24, which could carry half of her total capacity of 3,000. The Titanic carried only 16 lifeboats. Both struck an iceberg, and in the book, the ship moving 25 knots struck an iceberg on the starboard side on a night in April in the North Atlantic, only 400 nautical miles from Newfoundland. If you look it up and fact check me, the Titanic was moving 23 knots, 2 more. It struck an iceberg on the starboard side, the same side. This is where it gets insane. On a night in April in the North Atlantic, both 400 nautical miles from Newfoundland. The ship in the book sank and the majority of 2,500 passengers died, with only 13 surviving. And the Titanic, the majority of her 2,000 passengers died, with 705 surviving. A discrepancy amongst the surviving people, but only a 500 passenger difference. After the Titanic sank, many people credited Robertson as clairvoyant or able to predict the future. And I haven't even told you the craziest part. I've been withholding the name of the ship in the book. The ship was named the Titan. I'll let that sink in for 1 second. All the similarities I just described. The Titanic, with this book written all these years beforehand, all the similarities in the book, before the Titanic was even conceptualized, let alone named. In this small novel, the book was the Titan. 2 letters away from being the Titanic. Now take all of those coincidences together. In his book, the Titan may have as well been the Titanic. How is this possible? The first novel has a man writing a story that is massively similar to the Titanic, and then 25 years later dying on that same fateful voyage, with a passage in his own book that seems to describe his very death. And in the second book, a man describes just about every detail of the ship, the way it sunk, how many people were on board, the type of propeller, and even the name of the ship is the same as the Titanic, with 2 letters added at the end. As I've said before, some events are powerful. A wedding, a baby being born, a loved one passing, you can feel deep inside you something moving during these events. They are powerful enough to move a single person. I'm not overly religious, and I'm definitely overly skeptical, but even through my skepticism, some things are too real, and they affect you all at once in such a powerful way. Couldn't something be so powerful that it transcends the normal? That it creates so many powerful coincidences that someone whose eyes are open to the more than real could only get a small glance for a short second when peering through the looking glass of innumerable coincidental happenings? Maybe not. Maybe we piece random things together. But I'll say this, as more and more coincidences pile up, I start to think that things are definitely too real.